Hello,
Hello.
is everyone joining? Yeah. Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Apologies for the slight delay. We're finishing another meeting, and I think that the meeting room was occupied of some sort. But I think we're all here. Marta, you're back. You have come back from last night into the
Yes.
morning for this other session. Vincent and some of us has been up from very early this morning as we had another session. My name is Mauricio Cisne, and this is just by way of introduction to this brief session, a webinar on the exciting call for expressions of interest on diagnostics for COVID antigens. And we're talking to, I believe we have over 20 of you. Let me just take a look on the Jakar. You were there in the morning. It's wonderful. You're getting both sides of it. Maybe you have other questions. My dear friend Luis Galvão is there, collecting from New York, I imagine. And some others as well. If you do, just before I kick off and I give the floor to Vincent and to Marta, if you have any questions, please, you have a question and answer chat box. If you need to intervene, we can unmute you so that you can intervene, but just as a question in the chat box. And we will be sharing this presentation that you see in the links. And if I'm not mistaken, the RSVP team is going to be sending the presentation to the interested parties, so we don't lose you. But there will be also, along with the recording of this webinar, they'll be available in both websites of FIND and Unitaid. Okay. So without much further ado, let me pass the floor to the two of our hosts from Unitaid and FIND. Over to you.
Thank you, Mauricio, and good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on when you are. My name is Vincent Bretin. I'm from Unitaid, Director of Results, but also in charge of coordinating our efforts on COVID diagnostics and within ACTA. And I'm here with Marta from FIND. Marta, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Marta, and I lead the innovation and product development efforts at FIND.
Thanks. So really great to have you all here. And what we intend to do is this call is, first of all, go through a few slides to recap a little bit the positioning of this expression of interest, where it comes from, especially within the ACTA partnership, and some of the more technical specificities of the expression of interest. And then after that, we'll open for your questions, and we'll be happy to take them. So if we can maybe project the slides, either Marie, I don't know if you're the one. Thank you. And let's move directly to the first slide. So I'll cover the first part and then hand over to Marta for more of the specifics. Wanted first of all to recap, and some of you may be familiar with the structure of the ACT Accelerator, and ACT stands for Access to COVID Tools Accelerator, but maybe not all of you. So we thought it might be helpful to remind all of us of where this comes from and the structure. This is an initiative that was put in place and launched formally at the end of April of this year, launched in an event that was hosted by the President of the European Commission, but also they had the President of France, for instance, a number of heads of states and heads of agencies that were present as well. And that's really focused on bringing relevant tools for the COVID response to the world, and with particular emphasis on low and middle income countries. And it's focused on three pillars or partnerships with three types of commodities: vaccines, where CEPI and Gavi are co-convening the work there; the therapeutics pillar, where the Wellcome Trust and Unitaid are co-convening; and finally diagnostics, which is what we're going to talk about today, which is co-convened by FIND and the Global Fund. So each of those partnerships are a way to structure the efforts across the many partners, agencies, foundations that are involved in bringing those tools, including obviously industry, including civil society organization, and so on. And the ACTA partnership plays a role of coordination, setting an agenda, defining joint priorities, and also supporting resource mobilization efforts. And then each of the organizations that are contributing will take on part of the work and is taking on part of the work and implementing some programs. So if we can move to next slide, this is a zoom into the diagnostics partnership. So as I mentioned, co-convened by FIND and the Global Fund. And the way this has been organized is to essentially follow the product value chain or product introduction pathway, realizing that given the types of technologies that are available today for COVID diagnostics, but also the needs, the gaps, and the challenges that we face, there is a need to look across this value chain. And that's why there is, first of all, an emphasis on research and development, developing the right tools, and in particular, we'll come back to the antigen RDT technology in the context of this call. Sorry, can you, yeah, thank you, stay on this slide. Market readiness, which looks at ways in which we could support establishing market conditions that would be conducive to manufacturers and buyers as well, and creating conditions for, in terms of supply, in terms of price, that would allow low and middle income countries in particular to access the products. Then a supply group that's essentially building off the WHO-led supply consortium that some of you might be familiar with, where the World Health Organization and Global Fund are co-leading, and which is focused on supply and delivery of commodities for low and middle income countries. And finally, a country preparedness group that is led by the Africa CDC and PAHO, and that is looking to support countries in building capacity and being in a position to roll out the diagnostic technologies that are available or will become available. There's a few transversal groups that are also supporting this work, just for you to be aware. One around data modeling, and in particular, this is a group that's helping us make the case for diagnostic, understand the value add, understand the impact of testing approaches, which is a critical part of this work. There is a group that some of you might be involved in around private sector engagement, and we have an industry advisory group that is co-convened by the World Economic Forum and the Gates Foundation, and that aims to establish a permanent relationship between industry and the work that is happening within the partnership, and to make sure that information is flowing two ways, that we can share updates from the partnership with a broad network of industry partners, but also hear from those industry partners, get inputs, advice, and feedback on what we're doing as a partnership. And finally, the last component is around community engagement, and we have civil society organizations that are supporting the work and also playing a role in each of those topics. The last thing I would like to flag here is that I mentioned ACTA is about setting priorities and defining essentially a work plan for all of those organizations that then can be taken up by specific organizations. This work plan has been costed at a very high level, and this is what was called an investment case. It's a public document that some of you may have seen that explains essentially over the next 2 years what we foresee in terms of the amount of work that's required in each of those categories. And overall, we costed that to be a 6 billion ask, and this is what we used, in discussion with donors to solicit support and resources from donor countries. So 6 billion ask over 2 years, but a short-term need of 2 billion that's cutting across those different work streams, and that includes the procurement of 500 million tests over the next 12 months for low and middle income countries. So that's the order of magnitude that we should keep in mind, and that's what we aim for as a partnership. 500 million tests over a year, which, as probably all of you would know on the call, is quite far from where we are today, especially for low and middle income countries. And rapid tests have a big role to play. Moving to the next slide. This is telling you a little bit more about the objectives of each of the work streams and the working groups. So in R&D, the objective is really to, when and where relevant, accelerate the development and regulatory approval of well-performing, affordable, rapid tools, diagnostic tools. And there's also a digital component that, that is being considered. We know that, for instance, in antigen RDTs, and we'll come back to that, you know, the level, reaching the level of performance of target product profiles can be challenging. And so the partnership is looking at ways to support developers here. In terms of market readiness, we are considering market shaping interventions that could accelerate, for instance, validation of use cases, supporting manufacturing scale-up, supporting commercialization, improving the price conditions of certain products, also potentially supporting in-country regulatory support. So this is really the step that's in between a successful development and then a stable market, which is what the third bucket relates to. And then the other two buckets I think are quite self-explanatory. But what's important to keep in mind for this discussion is the expression of interest touches upon the point 1 and 2 here, and was a joint effort between the two working groups under the partnership. Next slide. So coming to this expression of interest, I mean, the starting point when we designed this was looking at the market and the types of challenges we faced for antigen rapid tests. And here, you know, there were challenges related to the performance of products and the availability of products that would mean the target product profile requirements. The target product profile from WHO is not yet publicly available, but will be very soon. And we know from, you know, the first evaluations that have been done or are ongoing that having products meeting those requirements is not easy. Secondly, we realized that from a manufacturing standpoint, the task ahead of us as a community is pretty daunting. The needs are enormous and they are very short term. And with, you know, any company, any single company will not be able to meet those needs, even companies with large production capacity. So we need to be creative as a partnership in terms of how we can support rapid scale up of manufacturing. And finally, LMIC availability is one challenge that we're seeing across product categories and that we anticipate for antigen RDTs potentially if we don't act quickly. We're seeing competition between countries for sure. We're also seeing vulnerability to supply chain, in particular when products come from very few places in the world, where that can create some tensions in terms of supply. So we're looking as well through this expression of interest at diversification of supply chains and locations for manufacturing. So DOI, so yeah, I'll just say in a second more on the same page if you can go back. The expression of interest is really aiming to touch on each of those challenges. So there's a component that is around developing and making sure we have the right product, a component around manufacturing, but also something that we will consider as part of the proposal is those 2 points here at the bottom right: commitment to access policy and access principles. So we're looking at not only proposal that can bring the right products and increase their production, but also benefit low and middle income countries in terms of volumes that can be dedicated for LMICs, in terms of prices, and also in terms of geographical diversification. So moving to the next page, this is a recap, and I'm sure all of you will have seen that in the expression of interest of the two main objectives here. One around development, making sure we have the right product for use in LMICs. And the second one around supply conditions. And a lot of that has to do with the manufacturing capacity, but also diversity of supplier base and affordability. So with this, I will hand over to Marta that will take us through some of the different aspects of the expression of interest. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vincent. So yeah, next slide. So as Vincent was saying, again, there are two main components to the COI: getting the products that are really meeting the requirements of the market, and then getting them manufactured at the scale and available in LMICs. So in terms of what we're looking for from the proposals, you know, the product, ultimately, it needs to be a fully functioning antigen RDT, but we would welcome proposals that are focusing on improving one of the components to ultimately integrate into a test that is either performs better, or it's more affordable, or it's more usable, right? So we're looking at affordability, performance, and usability in terms of the three main criteria for the test. So as we mentioned in the EOI, what we're looking for is an antigen RDT that meets TPP requirements. The TPP hasn't been published. We expect that to be happening next week. So in the meantime, we're providing some interim guidance on what that TPP would look like. So the intended use is for the early detection of SARS-CoV active infection. So hence, this is an antigen test. This is not a serology test. In settings where the molecular testing is not available in a timely manner. We realize that there are other ways of achieving active infection detection in decentralized settings, which could be done by point-of-care molecular platforms. We understand that's also a gap that needs to be met. This particular proposal is focusing only on antigen RDTs as one of the 2 ways to meet that gap. We already discussed this is for decentralized settings. So outside of laboratories, handled by healthcare workers or lay users with a short training period and no cold chain storage. The assay, because of the decentralized setting and the target user, has to be very simple to use. We understand that this is going to be coming from respiratory specimens that are not as easy to handle perhaps as blood. So there are going to be a few steps in there with the swab that has to go into an extraction buffer, and those are acceptable, but keep those at a minimum to essentially minimize sample handling. As I'm sure many of you are aware in the field, what we're seeing right now is that for the test to be high performing, meaning achieving a clinical sensitivity that is useful in the clinical setting, we may need a reader. As far as we can tell, visually read tests thus far in the market are not achieving the sensitivity, may not be achieving the sensitivity that is required. So while a visually read test is preferred from the usability perspective, a reader, the requirement for a reader is acceptable if it's necessary to meet the performance, the sensitivity requirements. We're also looking for proposals that include the use of easier to collect specimens. As you know, a lot of the earlier data is coming from nasopharyngeal or oropharyngeal swabs. We would prefer a test that has already claims for nasal swabs or perhaps sort of fluid, but already nasal swabs like mid-turbinate type of swabs that are easier to collect would be preferred. In terms of performance, again, the intended use is for diagnosis, meaning the specificity has to be excellent, and we're seeing here above 97%. The idea here is that all positives will be treated as true positives. We understand there is a trade-off now with sensitivity, and we're asking for the test to be as sensitive as possible, of course, with a target of at least 80%. Cross-reactivity should be proven, but cross-reactivity with SARS-CoV-1 with other SARS coronavirus is acceptable. And there is no need to differentiate the different viruses, really just for pure detection of the virus. Next slide. So what we're looking here again, as Vincent was saying, there is like a development component and there is a manufacturing component. We want to make it clear that we're looking for relatively late stage development proposals. And this is in line with the timeline of the EOI and in general with the timeline for the ACT Accelerator. We need to get products out in the market very soon, and very soon means in 3 months is better than in 12 months. Again, the overall timeline is 24 months. So any proposal that involves development has to ensure and it has to prove that the test will be ready and would be able to be transferred to manufacturing at the scale required within the next 12 to 24 months. And that's going to be critical for proposals that are entail development. If the product is really still in the concept stage and it's going to take, say, 12 months to even get to the end of development, it may not be, it's probably not going to be prioritized for funding. As we're saying here, we're calling innovators, so entities that may have either subcomponents or a full RDT that is somewhat different, and that differentiation returns and again improved performance or improved usability or improved affordability. We're also calling for RDT developers that may have antigen tests developed already, or they may be in later stages of development for the antigen RDTs, but they don't have either the manufacturing capacity or the commercialization. These developers are welcome to apply independently or already in a pre-formed partnerships of their choice. If independently, then within the EOI, the team will work in doing some matchmaking for how can this RDT be transferred to a commercialization partner. We're also very interested in working and hearing from IVD manufacturers on both fronts. This could be IVD manufacturers that have the commercialization capacity, but maybe they want to expand their manufacturing capacity to meet demand. And they are actually looking for support to expand that manufacturing capacity. That's something that would very much be in scope for this. Also, IVD manufacturers that have underutilized manufacturing capacity, and maybe they don't have an antigen test in development, but they would like to use their own manufacturing capacity for manufacturing tests from other entities. And as the organizations, as the callers for these proposals, we are open to any type of arrangement that works for the partners, whether it's a contract manufacturing arrangement or an OEM arrangement, a licensing. Really, for us, the purpose is to get these transfers working so that the tests are available. There is no a priori restrictions on our end on what type of partnerships are made. And then really the fourth component that we also want to emphasize is this idea of decentralizing manufacturing. So we're very interested in hearing from and receiving proposals from entities in low and middle income countries to develop manufacturing capacity there. Again, because of the constraints of the timelines, when we're talking about developing completely new capacity, we need to be careful and understanding, is this something that is attainable within 2 years, or are we more looking at expanding capacity of a small entity already, or perhaps improving the quality management systems or other interventions there. But again, very interested in hearing from local production capacity. At the bottom, we're talking a little bit about the benefits in this slide. So as we say, there is an initial envelope of $40 million to support about 2 to 4 proposals. The pledges are still coming in for the ACT Accelerator. So it may be that this initial envelope may be extended, and it's going to depend on the proposals that we're getting and on the pledges. So this will evolve over the next few weeks. In addition to financial support, the consortium will be providing technology support as needed, business development support, quality management, will provide expertise and support, and importantly, access to specimen banks and reagents. And again, all of this can be negotiated on a case-by-case basis with the different candidates. And I want to highlight on the financial support, we are considering a range of mechanisms, and the specific mechanism for funding may depend on the ultimate donor that every proposal is going to fund. Grant funding is available, and that may be better suited to more like development-based proposals or expansion proposals. There is also loan funding available. There is a lot of interest from development banks, and again, this may be more focused on the local production capacity, where there is interest in using loans to create that capacity. And we're also considering pool mechanisms in terms of market interventions. So all of those will be in scope and will be discussed individually with each one of the down-selected candidates. Next slide, please. In terms of the selection criteria, some of these are purposely broad because, as you've already gotten a sense, this is a broad EOI. We're looking for innovation and development and ultimately the manufacturing. So we're really, the main criteria is, can you prove that your proposed solution will be able to meet this need for 50 million tests that are fit for purpose, again, meeting TPP requirements and quality assure within a year of the EOI. And we understand that this is an aggressive timeline, but again, in the context of an emergency, health emergency situation. Just to reiterate, the product must meet WHO TPP. For those products that are not yet validated, we're looking for evidence that shows the potential for that product to meet TPP. And of course, the larger the evidence base, the stronger the proposal becomes. we also are looking for commitments from the manufacturers in terms of maximizing the access to LMICs, and that would be a critical component of what we're looking for. And then the other criteria are more standard. We're looking for demonstrated experience and capacity to deliver on the objectives. And, you know, an innovator will have to prove different capacity from somebody who is proposing to expand manufacturing. Next slide, please. So just a few details on the timelines and the process. As you know, the EOI opened last Friday on July 4th and will remain open for 3 weeks. We are requesting the proposals to be submitted in a PowerPoint format with a maximum of 20 slides. And please, I really encourage you to go to the EOI and look. There are a number of bullet points on what are the mandatory fields. We do not have a specific template for the slides, but we do request that all those mandatory fields are addressed in the slides, and that's going to be critical for the proposal to be considered. So even though we're not asking for a lengthy Word document, we do ask that all of the required fields are addressed. In the next 2-3 weeks, once we close the EOI, the proposals will be reviewed, and the review will entail video conferences between an expert panel of reviewers and the candidates. So we will be reaching out to the applicants to schedule those video conferences, which should be relatively quickly, 15-20 minutes. So, you know, a 10 minutes presentation and then the Q&A. And then in 2-3 weeks, we will be reviewing all of the applications and start down selecting and prioritizing for funding. And then at that point, we'll start reaching out to the applicants and start discussing next steps in terms of requesting a more full-fledged proposal, asking questions, and start talking about terms and negotiations. The plan, I mean, it's a compressed timeline. We're hoping to get to final decisions in the next 2-3 months. I think that's it. So now we welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Marta. Thank you very much, Vincent. So we've already got a couple of questions on the question and answer box that our panelists can read and respond to. A couple of sentences from me on the total budget. Right now, we have 40 million that have been committed to this. We expect that more will be made available. Our initial target is 60 million, but we don't have the entire funding yet. The proposals are proposals themselves, and we had a question this morning, you know, can one company submit their one proposal? Yes, this is about tests, about a very specific product that we want to see it out in the market. There's some more technical questions that go beyond my ability around the overall framing of the EOI. So let me turn back to Vincent and Marta to address, I think Lonnie had a technical question as part of this. So, and the prototype digital reader, I'll let Marta and Vincent take that over.
Great, so I can take this one from Lonnie on the digital reader. There is a strong interest from the ACT Accelerator on digital tools. So in that context, a digital reader would be in a scope. Again, we need to ensure that this is addressing some of the main requirements for the test, which is improving the sensitivity and the usability. So so long as you can prove that the digital reader is addressing those, then it's in a scope. There may be another call for proposals that is specific in digital tools that's still in the works. So we cannot give details there yet.
Thank you, Marta. If you have any more questions, and if you have any more questions, please pose them. If you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you for a live question. Oh, I've got a couple of raised hands. So let me see. I've got Peru, Carlos, and Lonnie. You want to complement your question? So let me just take this in this order. Carlos Garcia, Hadi Shafi, and Lonnie. Carlos, please, just a second. I think I need to unmute you. Just a second. Apologies. And yes, Carlos, you're muted. Go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you, Mauricio, and thank you, Marta, for the presentation. Yes, a couple of questions. I have to admit I'm a bit more familiarized with the COVAX facility, which falls under the pillar of vaccines of the ACT accelerator. And they have developed a specific mechanism for allocation and fair distribution of vaccine that is open to all countries, those self-financing countries, as well as those being financed by AOD. My question would be on the allocation, distribution, and pool procurement. That I remember one of the slides mentioning PAHO. And I presume this will come on a later stage after the development and the production of in the targets that you have specified. Can you please provide a bit more clarity on that? And then a second specific question. WHO has developed a web portal that I think it's called the COVID-19 supply portal, which has a component on PPE, a specific clinic products, as well as diagnostics. How does this pillar on diagnostics from the ACT accelerator interact with that supply portal from WHO, which is being also, at least it has been promoted among countries to be used for the procurement and distribution of products? Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to raise these questions.
Vincent, do you want to start addressing and I can supplement as needed?
Sure. Yes. Thank you for the question. In terms of allocation, you're right in saying that this is part of ACTA, but outside the scope of this expression of interest. This is really to support the development and the manufacturing scale-up. What you describe would typically fall under the supply group, which is essentially the WHO-led supply consortium. And this is the group that is looking at securing volumes for low and middle income countries, but also allocating those volumes to countries based on criteria that are established and related to the needs of countries. So that's where the linkage is, but that's happening outside of this expression of interest. And in terms of the portal, maybe Marta, you want to complement?
Yeah, so the WHO procurement consortium was initiated before the ACTA was started, but some of the organizations that are involved are the same. So Sergio Carmona here, who is both a representative in the ACTA as well as in the WHO procurement consortium, can give you more details on how the two interact. Sergio, do you want to comment?
Sure, Marta, thank you. Yes, as Vincent already alluded to, the supply chain consortium from WHO is in many ways the same supply chain working group of the ACTA, and it's very interlinked. However, the antigen RDT currently is not one of the products that would be found in that portal for procurement or for equitable allocation to the member states that are benefiting from the supply chain consortium at the moment. That consortium from WHO is well aware of the workstream progress made so far, and we wouldn't expect any misalignment, I hope, from the outcomes of this expression of interest. And I think, as Marta already pointed out, it will be well aligned with the TPPs that will come hopefully soon from WHO. Over to you, Marta or Mauricio.
Thank you, Sergio.
Thank you. We have a lot of we have a few questions on the chat box. If both of our panelists can look at them, and I have a couple of people on standby with live questions. So it's up to you if you want to address some of those. Some questions are quite easy, some are a bit more complicated.
I can give it a try, and Marta can complement. In terms of what's the scope of the expression of interest, it's clearly antigen RDTs. So that's what this specific process is about. So for instance, you mentioned serology test that wouldn't be qualified for this, or you mentioned some other technologies here as well. I would say, I mean, as Unitaid and FIND and ACTA in general, we're really keen to learn about those and be in touch. So that shouldn't prevent you from being in touch with us outside of the context of this expression of interest and share, you know, information about your technology and discuss potential opportunities for collaboration. But that would be separate. In terms of, I think there was a question around target price for LMICs. We don't have a set target price at this point. The target product profile of WHO that will be published in the coming days will include a range. But in general, that will of course be a key criteria as we look at proposals and select potential partners through this expression of interest. And also, as you will have seen, there is emphasis on access principles and access commitment in terms of volumes and price. And as part of the negotiation and the contracting down the road, we'll be looking, for instance, at establishing pricing mechanisms around cost of goods plus reasonable margin, which is the typical model we use in those contracts. So clearly, you know, price discussions will come down the road, but we don't have a target to give you today. And I see a question on budget restrictions involving indirect cost. I would say, but Marta, maybe you can complement on that. This will be part of the negotiations. You know, what we ask you to do at this point is a general proposal. So you can include what you think, you know, makes sense from the standpoint of what you propose to do. And the categories of cost will be quite dependent, you know, diverse and dependent on the specific of your proposal. And then in any case, you know, we'll get into, if your proposal is selected, a more detailed discussion about, you know, how we would like to shape this, what we see as costs that are eligible or not, and can take care of that later on.
Yeah, same on the FIND, and so far no specific restrictions on indirect costs. We will negotiate on a case-by-case basis.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, I have Lonnie first. You are unmuted, Lonnie. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. I really appreciate this webinar. So let me say that. It's an unusual experience to be able to ask these questions and get the information live. So I have two other things. I understand now that the digital reader is of interest. That's great. I don't understand this 2 to 4 proposals. Is it literally you're going to accept proposals from 2 to 4 entities? Because our part of this as a reader is important, but it's a lot less effort than developing a whole antigen test, I think. So I don't know how that works. The other point was I saw that freedom to operate, and we're a startup, and doing a whole freedom to operate upfront is pretty costly. I'm wondering if that could get supported by this non-monetary benefit, something in there, or we've done patent searches and all that sort of thing. So it appears everything is fine. We have a patent granted by the US government. So how do we handle, first of all, do you cut up the 2 to 4 proposals? Do we fit in that way? And how do we handle this freedom to operate in our expression of interest?
Yep, good questions. So I can start addressing them. In terms of the 2 to 4 proposals, we're looking at final end-to-end proposals. So this would be a solution that would integrate your proposed digital reader with a specific RDT and versus and the manufacturing capacity. So the expectation is that a single proposal is not going to be, even though your initial expression of interest will only focus on one component, where a proposal is the entire concept, including the reader plus the RDT plus the manufacturing. And then in terms of the amount of funding, we're fully aware that different proposals will require different scales of the funding. So we're asking that you propose what your specific component would require, and then we'll manage the overall budget. Hopefully that's helpful. In terms of the FTO, you know, a question is how much, and you may not have the entire answers, right? But you probably already have some preliminary sense of how much of the product that you're proposing you own versus how much you already know you are going to need to license from others. So it's more about what are of what you know, which components would already need licensing and paying royalties or licensing fees versus which ones you already owned. Understanding that for an earlier stage, a full FTO may not have been completed yet.
Thank you. Vincent, anything to complement on that?
No, that's good.
Okay, so let me please pass the floor to, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing, Hadi Shafi, or Hadi Hafi.
That's correct. My name is Hadi Shafi. Thank you very much for your time. This is really amazing. So I'm an assistant professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School, and we have actually a technology that that we showed that it works for different type of viruses, and including SARS-CoV-2. We already have results with more than 70 patient nasal pharyngeal samples. It has shown great performance so far. So I was wondering, first question is that we don't have a company around the technology yet. We're talking to a few entities at the moment, but I was wondering if your organization would have any kind of mechanism to help innovators like us in order to connect with other manufacturers in order to, you know, develop the product. That's first question. The second one, when you say 50 million devices, if let's say you're successful to do that, who would buy those devices? You know, is the company going to be responsible to actually go through the distribution and, you know, selling the products, or Unitaid would help in that direction? And the next question that I have in terms of performance and sensitivity, as you know, like, you know, probably, you know, doing continuous monitoring is better than having high sensitivity. That's what is being discussed these days. So when you say that the performance should be 97%, then would you consider like really low viral load samples as true positive? Let's say viral load samples with viral load of less than, let's say, 200 copies per milliliter, that's really, really low, right? So if, do you want the device to be as sensitive as, you know, really sensitive to detect those samples or not?
Great. So maybe I can address the first one and the last, and then Vincent can address the middle one on allocations. So in terms of being an academic group and whether this would be in a scope, I would say we really welcome individual applications and are happy to provide, to facilitate partnerships. Now, that has to be put in the context of the timelines and the fact that the ultimate goal of this is a commercialized test. So there has to be a clear path being proposed on how this test could be commercialized in the next 12 months at a scale. If you think, and obviously you know your technology much better, if you think that that is possible, then we would certainly consider facilitating a partnership. So I think at the end is about how early the technology is, how complex it may be, and whether you can propose that the whole process of establishing a partnership and freezing the design of the product and doing a transfer to manufacturing can be completed in the timelines proposed. And then for the last question in terms of performance, so just to clarify, the 97% is for specificity, not sensitivity. The sensitivity, we're asking for something in the 80%. And really what this is, it's a really good question, right? What type of CTs are we looking at the threshold? I mean, the overarching idea here is to be able to detect the most infectious cases. So when we say 80%, that's considered for all of the active infection period, from like a few days before symptoms appear to say a week to 2 weeks after the symptoms appear. And we know that there is a peak where the viral loads are going to be much higher, so low CT values, and that those are the 80% of the 80% of the total. We think that's what we want to capture. You know, one would think that is somewhere in the order of between 0 and 5 days of onset for many of the patients, and looking at detecting, samples with CT values of around less than 30. I mean, as you know very well, there is not a lot of good data relating antigenicity with viral loads. So there is not a clear cut of what type of viral load we're targeting or what type of CT value or what a specific CT value, but anywhere on the order of a CT of 30 seems reasonable. Hopefully that answered those two questions, and then I can let Vincent address the other one.
Yeah,
Thanks,
that was very helpful. Thank you.
And so on your second question around essentially who would buy those tests and what is the market for those tests, I mean, part of it is, as part of ACTA and this supply consortium, there is donor money, there is funding for buying tests, and there are tests right now, molecular tests. In the future, we hope antigen RDTs in the near future. So there is that source of funding and that procurement mechanism that is available. It's separate from the EOI, so the EOI doesn't imply any commitment in terms of procurement, but that's existing as a potential funded demand already. And there is ongoing pledges that Marta mentioned that aim to increase the resources we have as part of the partnership to be able to supply to low and middle income countries. So that's one. Of course, domestic funding countries. Many of these countries will be ready to invest some of their resources to buy those types of tests. And finally, I would say that as part of the partnership, ACTA, we're also looking at potentially additional mechanisms such as market incentives, volume guarantees, and things like that, to also support especially the takeoff of the market and the establishment of a solid market with visibility for manufacturers and de-risking when it makes sense. So it's not something that we can confirm yet. It's something that we're exploring. But if we see a need and a relevance for some of those mechanisms to provide more visibility and to de-risk the market, we might be in a position in the future to establish that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vincent and Marta. We have an interesting question on the Q&A box. Maybe you could address this. We have time for a couple more questions if you do. If not, we're very close to time anyway. So our panelists, if you could address the question in the box, please.
Marta, do you want to take this one? And I can take the next one.
Yeah. So we're not requesting full compliance with the TPP prior to the submission, among other things, because the TPPs may not be published on time before you need to submit the proposal. I mean, we're hoping there will be, but it may just be a few days. We are considering, so for products that are in later stages of development but may have not completed full validation, support for validation may be considered. And some of the entities involved in ACTA, including FIND, are conducting independent evaluations of the tests. So that's gonna depend on what the manufacturer requests. If there is interest in supporting a validation study, that could be considered. And specifically for products for which the performance has not been fully proven, it is likely that there is a milestone-based payment setup where there is support for finishing those developments, and then there is a decision on whether to move forward or funding the manufacturing scale-up pending the validation results.
So there's a question on IP. I can try to answer and also be bringing a little bit of the Unitaid perspective. So Marta, if you want to also complement from the FIND perspective. From our standpoint, IP will be a topic of discussion as part of the proposal. In particular, if there is a logic of partnership and technology transfer, obviously we will have to put in place the right licensing agreements between the company that has developed the product and owns the IP and the company that is going to manufacture. So it's clearly something that we would be looking at as part of those partnership models. As Unitaid and potential funders of some of those proposals, we're not looking to own IP ourselves. That's not the way we work. But I'll just flag that for medicines, and it's something we haven't done for diagnostic, but for medicine, some of you might be familiar with the Medicines Patent Pool, which is an organization that we're funding. and that is a pool for patents. So originator companies in the drug space can outlicense their products for a certain geographical scope and under certain conditions to the medicines patent pool, and the medicines patent pool has the right to outlicense those patents to generic companies that can then manufacture, distribute, and sell those products in the agreed geographical scope. So that's a model that, again, we've used for treatments so far, but that may be something we can explore if relevant for diagnostics in the future. Marta?
Yeah, same here. I mean, the IP ownership, it's going to be very much up to the specific partnership that is formed and the agreements that the different parties set up.
Well, thank you very much to both. And I think that we've reached pretty much our time, and also want to thank the participants from far in the field, from Asia and the Americas, and thanks our panelists. This is the way that we'd like to proceed. This is probably not going to be the last call for expressions of interest as part of this work on the diagnostic partnership of the ACTA. So we look forward to connecting with you, and thank you for the innovators participating in this. And if you have any questions, just send it to the RSVP. We'll try to, in the context possible of the open call, respond to any procedural issues you may have. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good end of the day, good day overall for some, and a good weekend.
Maurizio,
thank you very much, everyone.
Yes?
Can I just add one little remark? I saw from the chat and the questions in the morning that there are a lot of interest in innovation, and maybe the invitation to the R&D some of the questions may not fit this particular expression of interest. I think some of the ideas could well feed into the R&D pillar, working group of the ACT pillar on diagnostics.
Correct. Thank you very much. Again, we'll take a look at that and feed back to the partnership as a whole. And it's very important. Thank you for reminding us, Sergio, that this is only one head of this Medusa. So we're only dealing with one small bit here. In any case, everybody, thank you very much. Have a good weekend. Thank you, Marta. Have a good day. And Vincent, after a long day.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.